We are no one. We are everyone. And we are invisible. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
We convinced ourselves that they were gone, but they were just hibernating.
Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock.
They came for everybody.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Rouse. Today we're discussing the Watchmen HBO television series. Watchmen is an HBO television series, an American superhero drama television series that continues the 1987 DC comic series Watchmen, created by Alan Moore and David Gibbons. The series was created by Damon Lindelof. It stars an ensemble cast as Regina King as Sister Knight, Don Johnson, Tim Blake Nelson, Yahya Abdul Mateen II, Andrew Howard, Jacob Ming Trent, Tom Minson, Sarah Vickers, Dylan Stromberg, Louis Gossett Jr., and Jeremy Irons, as well as Gene Smart and Hong Chow. So we have a pretty stacked cast from the majority of those names. You've seen a lot of these people in, I don't know, tons of other pieces of work. I don't know how many pieces of work we've seen the great Regina King in. The first thing I can remember ever seeing her in was probably Daddy Daycare, because that's one of my earliest films I ever watched. Just like someone gave it to me on DVD, and I just happened to watch it a ton of times, and so I happened to see it recently, and I realized that she's the mother in that. But she starred in so many other roles, such as Friday, Jerry Maguire, Southland. Been on tons of television shows. She was on some of my favorite television shows, such as The Boondocks. I've heard good things about The Big Bang Theory, and she was one of my favorite characters in season 2 of The Leftovers. And The Leftovers as a series is a phenomenal series that is also created by the same creator of this show, by Lindelof. And many people know Damon Lindelof for being the creator of Lost, or co-creator at least. He was, alongside with like J.J. Abrams and all of them. He's also responsible for writing The Leftovers, which was, like I said, one of my favorite television shows. And so after watching The Leftovers, I realized I'm going to watch anything else Damon Lindelof writes and produces. I did go back and watch about 3 seasons of Lost, and there's some real good television in that first 3 seasons. I know how it ends, but I think the biggest problem with what happened with Lost was that it had to suffice for, 20-something episodes per season, so it ended up being an assload of episodes to fill. So it was amazing that it was as good as it was for that long. So we're talking about the Watchmen television series created by Alan Moore, who actually does not like any of his work to be interpreted on television, movies, or media. And to my knowledge, he does not take credit, nor does he get royalties from his work that is depicted on television or TV. Sorry, television or movies. But we have the music by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. We know them best well for being the song and one of the songwriters in 9 Inch Nails. And we know Atticus Ross also for being on the score of bringing the original score of The Social Network, as well as The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I think was the American version. And has also been part of Reznor's band 9 Inch Nails since 2005, which is pretty interesting. Okay, so Watchmen, this 9-episode series, was a difficult feature to tackle, I'll be honest. There was a reason that I haven't gone ahead and just released one of these quick episodes, episode by episode kind of thing. It this series kind of requires homework in a way that makes it hard to not only completely immerse myself within the medium of Watchmen, in the world of Watchmen. There's so much lived in history and rich background that is happening in this world that it's extremely difficult to say, everyone's going to enjoy this, because if you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't read the comics, it's quite difficult to immediately jump on in. So I'm gonna try to balance the review from trying to explain this series coming from someone that has no idea about the comics, television, movies, or anything. And so if you have seen the movie, it definitely helps, because it takes parts and bits and pieces of the Zack Snyder movie, which I did review, and it's I'll link it in this description so that you can check it out and what my opinions were on that. But it does take many elements of that movie and brings them forth to the television series. This television series is kind of a character study in a way that I was not expecting. It's very much the dissection of each one of these characters from the original Watchmen comics, as well as dissecting new characters that are introduced. So let me give you a quick synopsis from Wikipedia about what's going on in this series. Let's see. And by the way, television series is considered a quote-unquote remix of Lindelof's Watchmen stuff. So it's kind of like an alternate reality. So this is from the Wikipedia. While the series is technically a sequel, which takes place 34 years after the events of the comics, and I believe that would be the movie as well, within the same alternate reality, Lindelof wanted to introduce new characters and conflicts that create a story within the Watchmen continuity. Rather than creating a reboot, the series focuses on events surrounding racist violence in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2019. A white supremacist group called the 7th Cavalry has taken up arms against the Tulsa Police Department because of perceived racial injustices, causing the police to conceal their identities with masks to prevent the 7th Cavalry from targeting them in their homes following the White Night. Angela Abar, Regina King, a detective known as Sister Night, investigates the murder of her friend and superior, Judd Crawford, played by Don Johnson, and discovers secrets regarding the situations around vigilantism. So yeah, this was kind of a leap of faith for Lindelof and HBO to do this, and as a whole, I'll talk about it real quick in a non-spoiler section and then kind of break it down what I thought about the season. Overall, I thought it was an amazing endeavor, and the acting and the performances are extremely good. There are episodes within the middle of the season that absolutely were mind-blowing from a technical standpoint. There's an episode that is kind of shot of kind of like a play and done in what is like a bunch of one takes, shot in black and white, kind of in the style of Birdman a little bit. Extremely impressive directing in some of these episodes that just blew my mind. I love the character studies that this is providing. It's not just a superhero drama, but it's really dissecting, what makes these people tick in this strange alternate reality. And so having the characters such as Ozymandias as Adrian Veidt in here and having all of these characters really embellish the world of Watchmen. And so, long story short is, do you want to jump into the series not knowing anything about this? I'll say off the top, it's extremely difficult. However, I have heard a number of people that said that they were able to jump in, and once they got their feet wet, they were able to tread a little bit, and they were able to actually understand what was going on in this in the story. I do feel like you're thrown into this world in episode 1 kind of like abruptly, and there's so much of this world that feels strange and alternate and different that it's kind of like a slow reveal, almost like a fish out of water scenario of trying to understand where we are in this world. And if I were to I kind of like take my pop's and sit him down and tell him to watch this, and he sees all this happening on there, I don't think he would completely understand. And so the way this show opens up is showing the Tulsa race riots. I think it was called Black Wall Street, and when the KKK went and destroyed numerous tons, millions of dollars of businesses and of black owned businesses. And yeah, it was extremely difficult to watch from coming out of the gate of watching this season. There is a strong check of racial injustice within the system that this show is trying to tackle. It's really trying to hold a mirror up to I don't want to say society, but more or less the government and the practices that entitle it. But yeah, overall, this was a really ambitious television show. The acting, the cinematography, the technicals in it are all really good. The world is so lived in that sometimes it can be confusing about what exactly is happening in certain places. And so I will say that a couple of the main characters feel slightly underserved in a way. I'll cover which characters I believe were technically underserved, but mostly I think that was due to the 9-hour length of the season, and in some cases I felt like it could have gone a little bit longer. So let me break it down real quick. I'm not going to go too in depth because it actually has been about a week, or it's been 2 weeks since the end of the finale, so my head is kind of in another space of, I got a bunch of other television shows I've covered, so I'm kind of trying to retread about what exactly we saw. But so forgive me if I get a couple of the small details wrong, because this is a quite large mythology within the Watchmen universe. I will say this television show influenced me to go back and watch the movie just to kind of get a revamp on who these characters are. And I think that the movie definitely helps understand what's going on in the television show. I know that there's a couple of major plot holes that do not happen in the movie that do happen in the that are acknowledged in the television show. So that's when it comes handy to know the right podcast to listen to and that type of stuff, and the right source material to go. I really do think that this show requires you to have some sort of secondary medium or source material to refer back to, which comes in the podcast or the HBO PDpedia material, which is the supplemental material that they would release weekly with all of their each episode. And so and we assumed it was coming from this guy named Petey, which I believe that's confirmed. But yeah, so it is quite of an endeavor just to tackle it. I'm trying to think of the best way to do it. So I think by character, is probably the best way to do it. We're going to start talking about each episode. So, assumingly you've already seen this entire series, if you're thinking about going to watch it, I would absolutely go watch it. It's only 9 episodes. If you don't understand it, come back and, listen to the podcast, and you'll be like, oh, okay, so that's what that meant. Or, I'll refer you to other podcasts there or other pieces of material that might be able to help you understand what, whatever you're looking for. So, yeah, I think that, from the visuals, technicals, this is a definite win for 2019 on the television calendar. I liked this show as a whole better than the last finale of Game of Thrones, considering how polarizing it is. So if you got that HBO and you don't know what to watch, go check out Watchmen real quick and come back and listen to the spoiler section with us. So each episode of Watchmen was very different. It kind of like in the way The Leftovers started out a tad bit slow. It did drop you into this world, like what the fuck is going on. Lindelof likes having a weird fucking world, and that's just the kind of guy he is. And this world is right there up his alley. So the beginning really sets up the 7th Cavalry and this cop that is shot at the beginning. That cop is almost never referred to again. I do think that there's a couple of plot lines within the entire Watchmen series that are kind of dropped in a way. And one I would say is the way that this really is starting at the beginning is with the Tulsa race riots, with the things called, Robert's reverdations and stuff like that, or especially like reparations, which are supposed to be like tax breaks for people that were affected by the Tulsa race riots. And this is something I had never heard of before in my life. And so when they were referring to it in this context, I was like, oh my gosh, this is completely enlightening. So I felt like I was kind of learning something at this point. So, and technically we did. I mean, everyone that saw the first 10 minutes of the Watchmen series and had never heard of the Black Wall Street is completely enlightened about that now. Or, to an extent, at least we know. Don Johnson, Regina King, Tim Blake Nelson, Yahya Abdul-Mateen, fantastic actors. And, Jeremy Irons is amazing. And, by now we're in the spoiler section, so I would have assumed you would have seen this entire series by now. We know that Adrian Veidt is played by Jeremy Irons. I love Jeremy Irons, his performance in this. He's just, he's chomping up every bit he can of the Crookshanks. And he's just got this, charisma about him no matter really what he's doing. Even though he's a fucking lunatic in this, he's still a lot of fun to watch. Let me see, what was his name? Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshank, that's what it was. So yeah. At the beginning of the season, we're like thrown back at the very beginning. Each episode breaks down the character of Adrian Veidt just a little bit by little bit. I think we're seeing year by year by year, and it's him being stuck on Europa, some moon out in next to Jupiter or something like that. That Dr. Manhattan had teleported him to go take care of these living beings that apparently Dr. Manhattan created, that he alluded to at the end of the Watchmen series. And so it's something that a lot of people had talked about and alluded to. There was only a couple of different theories about where Adrian Veidt was the entire season and what exactly was going on. And technically it looks like we were getting flashbacks after a certain episode, or all of them might have been flashbacks, because at some point Adrian Veidt was picked up by his daughter, who we find out later in the season. She's not in the first episode, she is in the 4th episode, played by Hong Chow. She is Lady True, who is the daughter of Adrian Veidt, who we ended up finding out that the mother artificially inseminated herself, I guess, with Adrian's, stuff. And also we find out Adrian's a virgin, or he doesn't believe in sex or something like that. I don't know, something, just a lot of stuff. Just it's a big chunk. So anyways, the arc that Adrian Veidt goes on it's interesting because he kind of is a guy that is struggling with he thinks that the one way to to eliminate war is to have almost a big, massive, cataclysmic event. And so in the Snyder movie, he makes it look like there's some sort of massive Dr. Manhattan accident that causes people to explode or vaporize or something like that. 3 million lives are lost. In the television show, it's alluded to that there was a giant squid attack, and that there's there's continuous squid falls throughout the season, and we see one squid fall at the beginning of the season and one at the very end. And we know that there's businesses popped up out of the squid falls. This world truly does feel lived in. And so I would say that I don't 100% understand Adrian Veidt's headspace about, trying to blame everything on Dr. Manhattan so that it creates world peace. But in some sort of way, it doesn't create, a satisfying mean for Adrian Veidt. I mean, we still see that he's a really self-conceited ass. And so, having him kill his daughter, Lady True, at the very end of the season, I didn't really know what to think about it. I mean, Lady True's true motivation, was, I mean, she was upset about the way the Vietnam War was laid out and ended or happened or something, and she wanted to bring quote unquote world peace by transferring Dr. Manhattan's powers all the way into hers. And she wanted her clone mother there, and she had this elephant symbol. There was a lot of questions that surrounded Lady True and her motivations about what exactly she wanted to do, what she was doing. It appeared from the trajectory that at some point she was able to detect that, I don't know, she had some sort of hindsight, and she knew, or not hindsight, she was able to see the future, to see that Adrian Veidt was going to need to be picked up at some point on Europa because of her teleport, or sorry, not teleport, her satellite, sorry. And so she has Adrian Veidt brought back down to Earth, but not after he's, frozen in this kind of carbonite Star Wars type thing. So I had just a lot of questions about, I guess, her motivation, about why did she need to bring her mother back. I know that she was working with cloning technology, and there's this really compelling episode, I think it's episode 4, that she does this. She walks in this farmer's house, and she's, puts on a timer, talks about, I can give you I know you have problems conceiving a kid, so I can fix that. And if you don't take this kid that I put in your arms in 10 seconds, I'm taking the kid back. It's like, whoa. She's a billion, triple zillionaire. So I just felt like I didn't 100% understand her. I know that we probably didn't want her to become all powerful. A lot of questions surrounding that character. The more I think about it, I mean, it made sense. Her plan was falling behind the 7th Cavalry plan, kind of like as if she knows Dr. Manhattan can see the future, so just a lot of questions with Dr. Manhattan, and that is a fascinating character. So let's continue on. Let's do Gene Smart real quick and Looking Glass, because those are kind of two side character supporting characters. Looking Glass, we find out he's kind of like the 2019 Rorschach, and I would say he's kind of like the anti-Rorschach. Is that fair to say? Because I was pretty sure that Rorschach was more of a very conservative, almost super right-wing, hardcore conservative. I know I already said that, but Looking Glass does not appear to be that. I mean, he looks like a product of, a rough upbringing, possibly abused, and being attacked. I think that was the episode that he sees the giant squid, just being traumatized, I guess. I mean, that was a fascinating episode, and I remember the pullout that they do with, I think it's Looking Glass is playing around in the circus funhouse with this girl that he's just happens to meet, and she takes all of his clothes, and when he walks outside, everyone is like, are they exploded or bleeding from the eyes or something? I don't remember exactly what had happened to the people, but there's just like bodies everywhere, if I remember correctly. And it was an amazing shot. The thing is, the character is more or less kind of a carrot dangling in front of our face, and less so much integral to the plot. It feels more like, oh, it's Looking Glass. Look, he's there, Oh, wait, well, he didn't do anything. Okay, I guess, well, that was an interesting character, but I guess he didn't get anything memorable to do. But some people would say having him be the one person to see where the squid fall is actually happening, having him be the one to discover with Gene Smart that all of this has been a fake falsity, or whatever you want to call it. It's been a sham. That I guess that's where the emotional resonance. I don't know, resonance. I don't know. I'm fucking just sounds crazy. So yeah, and the Silk Spectre character played by Gene Smart. Gene Smart is phenomenal. We've seen Gene Smart in tons of things. Really loved her in Legion. But yeah, having her in here as another strong, badass character that formerly was a lover of Dr. Manhattan, it's not, wasted always sounds negative, but it does sound like a missed opportunity for them to have really had, some real chemistry at the end of this show. I felt like Silk Spectre is set up as someone that is a combination of, having parents that were superheroes and one of them being a shithead, and then falling in love with a god, and them having kind of no connection at the end is slightly disappointing. I mean, we have her introduction is her telling jokes to Dr. Manhattan, sending him information. Little do we know he's not receiving any of that, and he's not on Mars, and she doesn't know that. But I felt like there was just a missed opportunity to have her really interact with her former, lover and boyfriend. But Regina King and Yahya Abdul Mateen II. First of all, I knew it. If you go back and look at or listen to the Aquaman review, I'll tell you right then and there, I knew that guy was gonna be a badass actor. I hadn't seen him before that, but he went on to go into some pretty interesting Black Mirror episodes. Then he went into what is he? He went on to play one more role. I'm thinking he was in Us. That was it. And so I really enjoy this character and this actor. Wonder what else he's going to be in. Holy shit, he's going to be in Candyman and The Matrix 4 and Aquaman 2. badass. So let me see. Yahya Abdul-Mateen, the first, 6 episodes of this series, we are like, where is Dr. Manhattan? Where is this motherfucker? He's been missing for I don't know how long. And so there were 1 or 2 speculations that 1, we're never going to see him. 2, he's not in the budget. 3, he's on Mars. 4, it's Yahya Abdul-Mateen. So it ended up being our last choice. Well, it's not our last choice, but it happened to be the last, on the multiple choice I just laid out. But yeah, it ended up being him. And having that kind of recontextualize the whole series was a lot of fun. I remember I think it was the 8th episode when Regina King takes the hammer to his head to remove the little chip that Adrian gave him to remove his memory and to help him obtain just being a human. That was pretty intense. I remember that whole thing, I don't remember, she says something like, hey baby, we're in trouble or something like that. And she sees this blue glow. Speaking of the blue glow, I could not believe that they had the blue glow on the poster for the entire series. We got the answer to the entire series on the poster, in my opinion. Also, eggs. Eggs were a big key within this finale. Eggs were almost as big of a character as anyone else. And we also got to talk about kind of the Bass Reeves of it all. The superhero they were referring to at the beginning of the series, that her grandfather ends up kind of impersonating in a way. What was her grandfather's name again? Her grandfather's name... Oh, they cover his name because they don't want it to be a spoiler. Oh, it's Louis Gossett Jr. plays Will Reeves. And, yeah. So, also, child actors were pretty phenomenal in this. Not phenomenal, they're really good. No complaints, they just didn't have tons to do. There were a couple of scenes that made Yahya Abdul-Mateen seem cold. I mean, like, most people would probably say that he would probably be an atheist if he had that conversation with his kids, if he was talking about, where did Uncle Don go? Where did Uncle Judd go? And they were like, yeah, well, he's just so flat out blunt about it. It's a little on the nose. Also, he loves his Ernest Hemingway. I believe that might be covered in the original Watchmen series. And let me think anything else. I think he's always making eggs or something like that, and waffles. I don't know. I think that the first conversation they had was, the first conversation they had, him and Regina King back in, I don't know, what was it, like the 80s or something like that. About can he transfer his powers, and he says, yes, I could do it technically through an egg, and I wouldn't give my powers to anyone that wouldn't consent to it. So at the overall, let's just talk about the very end real quick. The whole part with the race riots feels like it's a little bit dropped at the end, although I do like the visual of having Regina King as possible our new Dr. Manhattan. I couldn't believe that Dr. Manhattan is able to just obliterate everybody in episode 7, but then he knows that he can't do anything to this cannon fire that's about to blast him in the back and send him all the way to the little cage that the 7th Cavalry has created. And I guess that the 7th Cavalry was using all of the the lithium batteries to create whatever is holding Dr. Manhattan in there, which is apparently kryptonite. But anyways, I do think that they kind of dropped the ball on the racial injustices of what's going on in Tulsa, and what's going on with the 7th Cavalry. I mean, the 7th Cavalry was there and kind of got vaporized, but it felt a little easy because Dr. Manhattan is so OP. It makes sense why they have to kind of put him to the side for the majority of the season, because he can see everything, do anything really. And I was surprised we got some blue dong in this, but HBO's not afraid to do it. They got to do it. Let me see what else. All right, so the Will Reeves stuff. Fascinating episode. That was the episode where they go through the memories and are going, back, trudging through all of his past, talking about him as a young cop and all of the injustices. It literally broke my heart. I think it was episode 6 of let me see. It was This Extraordinary Being, which everyone thought was going to be Dr. Manhattan, but it ended up being, I think it was Regina King. But the editing and the direction in that is phenomenal. It's by Stephen Williams. I'm not even sure who that director is. I think he's been on other stuff such as Westworld and Lost and other shit. Bloodline, okay. But yeah, so This Extraordinary Being was one of my favorite episodes, especially because they go back and show that the character of Will Reeves ends up being a character that is covering his identity. And so that's one big thing about this entire series, is that he's covering his identity as the Hood of Justice, which makes tons of sense why he wears a noose around his neck now and sprays his face. But it's established that Will Reeves he doesn't want to be associated as a black man, but he can still go out and kick some ass. But what's interesting is seeing how that turns him into kind of is it his? Yeah. And then its influence into Angela's father, I believe. And we see how the younger kids are starting to pick up the makeup and the masks and stuff like that, and how they don't want that to happen. They think that's a bad representation. They don't believe. Will does not want that to pass on through the family bloodline, to be in a mask. And it appears that at some point Will and what is her name? What is her name? Will and June. Okay, so Will at a very young age is trying to leave Tulsa and ends up becoming part of the wreckage of what's happening at Black Wall Street, I believe. And that's what's caused him to find June as a baby in a field, and somehow they grow up together and eventually get married, which some people did have an issue about, kind of like the growing up part. Kind of, wouldn't you be more of brother, sister, and less like boyfriend, girlfriend? But I haven't really thought about it too much. I guess it's, that's a, it's a question, but it's like, what, you're either fine with it or you're not, and regardless if you are, what are you going to do about it? It's like, that kind of thing. It's, I don't know. It didn't immediately jump off the page as it bothered me at first, but I guess I can see why it would bother some people. Let me see anything else. The fourth wall breaking aspects of this series. I know I kind of yada-yada'd over that Will Reeves stuff, but I do think that, it's fantastically shot, but it's not wrapped up at the very end of this series. I feel like that the racial elements of this season are still kind of lingering, and they were hard to watch. I mean, you see a lynching at one point, and that from first person perspective, and it was extremely hard to watch. I was like, Jesus, this is some tough stuff. And the actor in that is from The Leftovers too, Jovan Apto, and he plays young Will Reeves, and I was very impressed with his performance. But yeah, so I did feel like there was a couple of drop plot lines toward the end of the season. There's tons of great things about this series. I wouldn't be mad if we didn't get a season 2, mostly because I felt like this is a very contained season. I kind of like how it's kind of, jumping on a ledge. It's like you don't really know if you're going to make it or not, but if you make it, it's really satisfying, and I think that they really landed this. They stuck the landing on this genre. And so I'm looking forward to more Watchmen series stuff. One or two more things were the Minutemen series they had on television throughout the entire season. I love the world building in this with Robert Redford having, like, I don't know, unlimited terms, but we never actually see the character. Thought that was pretty interesting. What else do we got? The 7th Cavalry guy, what is his name? With the Dr. Manhattan shorts, James Wolk as Joe Keane. He plays such a good country asshole that it was hard not to say this guy was going to be extremely influential to the ending of the series. Once you heard him talk at the beginning of the series, I was just like, this guy is totally, like, needs to get, like, I know that this guy is clearly involved with the 7th Cavalry. And John Dud, what's his name? Don Johnson, and Jane Crawford, Frances Fisher, who plays Jane Crawford. First of all, my God, she was kind of obvious as well. I felt like her and Don Johnson played like this especially sinister couple that you don't really know too much about, but kind of behind the scenes, I mean, they're pretty. They if we would have seen a little bit more behind the scenes of them two, it would have been extremely sinister. And it's pretty fucked up that the one night that they busted up in Angela's house to, I guess, shoot her and her husband or whoever, that Judd ends up befriending her after that accident, which is just fucked up on so many levels. I don't know. I did like the homages to, like, Zack Snyder and some of the action scenes, the ramp up, ramp down, speed up, speed down, fighting. But yeah, it's a wallop of a television show. You can kind of probably hear it in my voice, just kind of how exhausted I am of just talking about it. It's a mouthful. It's a chunk. It's a lot. I don't want to say it's 100% fun, because a lot of it does have to do with heavy race relations and, mortality, I guess, on some parts. And watching from a Dr. Manhattan perspective, I mean, seeing him explain that he is experiencing all times all at once is just one of the most mind-bending pieces of dialogue that they can really, write for us. I did think that his glow looked good, but I'm not sure if the actual look of Dr. Manhattan as, just painted up blue, I'm not sure if that worked 100% for me, but I thought the majority of the effects really did work. Seeing massive Manhattan is just a crazy visual. Just seeing 100-foot tall Dr. Manhattan is just crazy. Anything else we need to do? Anything else we need to check? Anything else we want to... Is Regina King the Dr. Manhattan, the new Dr. Manhattan at the end? And I certainly think she is. Lindelof said that if you look at the poster from the first poster that was released, 14 weeks ago before the season finale, it's of Angela Abar standing in front of what looks like the smiley face almost from Watchmen, but it's more like an egg yolk, which symbolizes birth, I would assume. And she is completely blue, which would assume that if she ate the egg, that she turned into Dr. Manhattan at the end of this, given that we don't exactly know. So that's my prediction. I just thought it was a really interesting television show to watch, and I wanted to cover it for everybody just in case anybody wanted to check it out and then get a interesting recap on it. But yeah, thank you all for watching, listening, whatever you're doing on the LuckyDog podcast. Thank you all for supporting. Rate, share, subscribe, LuckyDog podcast. If you're feeling generous, paypal.me/LuckyDog podcast. For all donations, that would extremely help. Comments, questions, concerns, email the LuckyDogPodcast@gmail.com, Twitter @LuckyDogPodcast, Facebook link, Twitch link, Instagram link, all down below. All in the podcast links. All in the description links. You already know what it is. Can you believe that it is the end of 2019? You may not be getting this till actually in the new decade, but I'm recording this in 2019, so I'm still before the decade turns, and so I'm just like mind blown about this this decade. I honestly... about this year. This year was amazing for one thing. It's a lot has been accomplished on my part. I hope you got a lot accomplished from the production standpoint, or from production standpoint, from being productive standpoint. I hope you reached all of your goals. Be sure to check the podcast links in the library on SoundCloud at the LuckyDog Podcast, and you'll be able to check out, the top movies of the decade. I went ahead and checked out, I don't know, it was like 500 different movies that I sifted through that I've seen, and I, chose my top 10 of the decade. It wasn't easy, but I, did it for y'all. Also, we're going to do a top 10 of 2019, so be on the lookout for those podcasts, and thank you for listening, watching, supporting the LuckyDog Podcast. I hope everyone had a happy holiday and an excellent New Year. Thank you, and take it easy.
What are you two talking about?
Oh, nothing. Just the end of the world.
Almost forgot about Lube Man. I guess we found out that Petey was Lube Man. I mean, he was Lube Man more than once in this series, so if you go check out the Petey files or whatever, I think that is confirmation that is him. It is kind of a disappointment that that's like never talked about again. It's just like randomly just slips through the cracks, literally, the fucking Lube Man. But yeah, I didn't want to forget about that. Also, the music in this is about freaking baller, bad ass.